Hi, we're talking about Your Money Matters on NDTV Profit, and my name is Alex Matthew. This show aims to get you actionable insight on everything money related, how to spend better, how to save better, and how to plan for the future. And often we speak about the benefits of starting early. But the question is, how early should you really start? Should you start inculcating the idea of managing money as early as school? Should it be a part of the curriculum? And this has been spoken about in the past, but I think my guest today has some interesting insights to bring to the table, and I'm excited to talk about this with her. Joining me now is Lavanya Mohan, chartered accountant and author of Money Doesn't Grow on Trees. Lavanya, as always, thanks so much for taking the time. In your opinion, how early should this conversation about money start?
Thank you, Alex, for having me again. I would like to start by saying that children are actually incredibly perceptive. We think that they don't understand money, but they actually do. They're observing everything, everywhere, all the time. So in terms of starting, I would say a formal introduction to money, I think one can start as early as age 8, between ages 5 to 8. You can actually start talking to them and they will grasp the concept of money very quickly. You'd be very surprised. Now, here, I'm not talking about like economics or like the theory of money or any of that, but simply the fact that all of us have to deal with a limited resource, right? I think that is a lesson that we can actually start introducing between the ages of 5 to 8. Whereas from the ages of 13 to 18, you can have a more comprehensive introduction to money, a more formal introduction to money, where you can actually talk about saving, investing, how money impacts your future, etc. I think that can happen from ages 13 to 18. And honestly, I think all of us do come out at 18, right? When we all start college, wondering why we have no idea about money.
Yeah.
So I think the ages of like 13 to 18, which is basically 8th standard to 12th standard, if you want to look at it from an academic calendar, I think that's actually a great age to start like the basics of what is tax, for example.
But even before that, and we'll come to some of the specifics, but a funny story, Lavanya. My mum, I think my sister must have been 8 years old. She's a couple of years older than me. And we used to have to go to the store, of course. There was no, application to get stuff. And so she sent her to the store to get 1 kg of panjasara. And obviously in Malayalam that means sugar, and my sister did not know that, and she went to the bemused shopkeeper and asked for 1 kg of panjasara, and he had absolutely no idea. But then she effectively knew that it cost 10 rupees at the time. So it started from that point, right? An 8-year-old was sent to go something for groceries for the house, so you learn how to transact with money. But let's get into the specifics. If you say that you start that early, and you say that you wish that you were taught more about money when you were a kid, and you wish that it was incorporated into the school books, what should be incorporated?
I think there are a few broad lessons that need to be incorporated, starting with time value of money. This was something that I learned as a student of chartered accountancy. It was one of the first lessons we learned. And what it basically tells you is that money today is not the same as money tomorrow. And in fact, money today is more valuable than money tomorrow, and that money loses its value over time. Now, this is a very important concept because it articulates the reason why our grandparents were able to buy farmlands with 100 rupees. You hear these stories of like your grandmother saying, I used to buy gold for 10 rupees and all of that. So the reason they were able to get gold and the reason we're able to get like half a bottle of Coca-Cola is because of time value of money, that money loses its value over time. And in order for us to be able to cope with this loss in value, we need to invest or we need to grow our money so that we're not facing a loss. One other great example is when demonetization happened. a lot of cash reserves, right? You were converted into bank rolls or whatever. So at that point in time, you like all these. There were so many stories of all these housewives with these dabbas of like literal, those old Danish cookie boxes of money
Yeah.
where they believed that they had kept together like a prized sum, but it ended up being like very little towards the end. So money loses its value over time. You can't keep idle cash. You have to invest. So that is a very important lesson that I think that all of us need to know at a young age. So you understand the importance of saving and investing at an early age. The second lesson I think all of us need to learn is about inflation, which is basically like the flip side of time value of money, that everything's prices increases over time. And it's not just about the price of sugar increasing over time. It's not just about the price of your rice and pulses increasing over time, but also healthcare and education. So all of us plan for higher studies, right, as students. And you might have a number in your head when you're in standard 9, which can change drastically by the time you're in standard 12. So how do you account for that? How do you save for that? So I think these are two very important lessons. Of course, the third lesson should be in tax, to understand why we pay tax, because I think the moment we get our first jobs, it's tax that really stumps us and tax that really has us pulling our hair out. When it's not as complex as people perceive it to be. And had we been introduced to it at an earlier age, I think it would have been better.
Yeah, a lot of people, very interestingly, don't understand, and of course, a lot of people that are tuning into this show do, but I think they would be surprised at the number of people that I've met that don't understand the slab-based system. They think that it's a flat rate of tax that they're paying and that it gets deducted from their salaries and they don't ever see it. But it is in fact a slab-based system, and I think with the movement to the new tax regime, the fact is that if you're earning up to 12 lakh rupees, it's great for you. So if you're starting out, and if you are less than 12 lakh rupees, which I think a lot of people are, you're effectively not paying tax. Wasn't the case for a lot of us when we started, I must tell you that. But having said that, there are a couple of other things, right, which is about debt. And it's important to talk about this as well, because people don't realize the concept of a debt trap or various other things. And I think in our day and age, the use of debt is pretty normalized. Our parents, I think, were a lot more cautious, Lavanya, about debt. Would you agree?
I agree. In fact, I came from a very debt-averse family, to the point it was drilled into us to never borrow, and that borrowing, will land you in trouble. But given the rise of more sophisticated credit tools, BNPL, I remember during COVID was all the rage. It's mellowed down a bit, I would say, but no cost EMIs today, BNPL, the number of options that people have to get something immediately, right? I think the converse of debt, if you really think about it, is delayed gratification. You don't just go borrow, get something immediately. Instead, you save for a longer period of time. You wait until you can afford it, and then you get it. But today, the proliferation of debt is so vast, and it's become so casual, like you said. Like anybody can borrow at any point in time without any understanding of credit scores, or without any understanding of the fact that debt is never free. I feel like people don't get that debt is not free, that you will be paying something at the end of it, whether it's by way of processing fees. I saw a post on Reddit this morning where this person basically had an outstanding of 4,000 rupees on a MobiQuick quick loan, right? Like they call them zip loans or whatever, low cost loans. His outstanding was 4,000 rupees, but because he'd forgotten about it or decided to not do anything about it, the outstanding as on date, like 6 months later, when he opened up the app, was 21,000 rupees. Like in 6 months, simply in late fees. And now he's posting on Reddit, or she's posting on Reddit saying, "What do I do?" Right? And apart from paying like this massive amount, which has, snowballed because of really high interest rates, which people don't really understand, because they're marketed also in very dangerous ways. They say 1%, borrow at 1%. It's actually 1% per month, like 12% per annum, which is huge, which is massive. And then For some quick loans, it's also calculated on an everyday basis. So imagine how it compounds,
Yeah.
right? So I feel like people are not taught the consequences of debt, and I agree with you. One must be taught that debt is not free and that there are consequences, which is why it should be a very considered decision. Debt obviously helps people in many ways, right? Or at a time of emergency, or if you're planning a very large purchase, it can be a fantastic financial tool if you know what you're using it for and if you've considered the pros and cons.
Okay.
But to casually go and buy, get into debt, I think is definitely something that needs to be addressed at a very early age, so that when you get out of school, when you get into college, when you start your first job, when you're earning money for the first time and you feel invincible, you're not tempted to just buy everything at the same time. You're not standing in line for an iPhone for like 71,000.
And that's exactly what we're going to talk about next. But before we end this conversation, I want to throw a kind of a rapid fire at you, but then you're essentially going to answer this in rapid fire. I'm not going to keep asking you questions. 3 things that you think, and because we're likely to wait for some time before all of this gets included in a curriculum, so it falls to parents to do this. 3 things that you think parents should and should not do when it comes to talking about money to their kids.
Don't pass on your money anxieties. Please don't tell your child that we don't have this or we can't do this. I think you should talk about money, but don't talk about your money anxieties, because that children are very perceptive. They absorb and it becomes their anxieties, right? What you should do is definitely tell them that money is a limited resource. I think all of us, especially double income parents, we're so hell-bent on like making sure that our children get everything. I don't think that's the right approach either. You need to tell them that it's a limited approach, it's a limited resource, and make sure that they know that they have to make choices, right? You don't get A or B. You don't get A and B. You get A or B, right? And I think the third thing is to really help them understand the joy of delayed gratification. If they want something expensive, kids want things all the time, help them save for it, help them wait, and help them really understand the joy that comes when you save for something and when you get it by yourself. And yeah, I think those would be like the 3 things that you
Should do. Yeah, and I think that's great advice. Lavanya, thanks so much for joining in, as always, and for taking the time.
Thank you so much, Alex.